Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to pull a double episode. Yeah, so I went on one app and obviously it said 12 episodes, but then I really researched and checked and made sure to make sure that I'm going to finish the series. Then I found out there was 13 episodes. I'm like, "Oh, crap." So I decided, I'm like, well, I'll just watch both episode 12 and 13 and just finish the series and just do this all in one go. So technically 2 episodes in one for this review, and then calling this a series, calling this a wrap. Um, because I admittedly said, I want to stop at one point and then complete this right on this day, and then so I can just kind of be done with the series and do either something new, experimenting, whatever, and then just kind of be done. And then I realized, oh, there's 13 episodes. I want to figure out a quicker way to just call it a day with the series. Not that it's been like a horrible series. It wasn't like an arduous process to watch. Like, it was just the fact of me just going in and finally just going, okay, I want to see how exactly this show ended, because I barely remember how the show kind of began. There was bits and pieces that I did remember, but I didn't remember how this show really ended, and so I really wanted to confirm the ending of it all. So with that said, so really in episode 12, we're kind of mostly focusing on Blade and Collins doing going and spotting Charlotte with Thorn, so that way we can get that Thorn out of our side. And really there is some talk about a Tucker Muffet who's to put together a conclave, building for the pure vampires to get them all together, because I guess you have to build a whole entire building to house these pure vampires, or in other words, they just wanted another set piece that looked different than anything they've done before, so this is what they did. And then the very last episode is basically the Marcus dealings with the people of the Conclave, and Blade busting in, and eventually we'll get to all that. So I kind of tee these episodes up. So basically, it kind of felt like these episodes were at least they were kind of interesting compared to the other ones. But I also kept on thinking in my mind, it's this is how they're ending this. It kind of felt a little flimsy. Also in the last episode, they are to find out where Blade hides his hat, basically, and that's where Blade decides to, in similar form, go and find where the Conclave is and go and take them out, in same likeness fashion. So with that said, yeah, basically they're just annihilating and destroying everything for the sake of just hey, we have money, so we need to just throw away money on these last 2 episodes. That's what kind of feels like these last 2 episodes are, just throwing away money to call this show a wrap. Really, I thought it was also kind of funny how it seemed like the very end of the very last episode seemed like they were trying to do cliffhangers to make it seem like there was going to be a season 2. I don't know if they were sure or not whether the show was going to end, and maybe they naturally assumed the show wasn't going to end, but it seems like they kind of, most of the point, kind of completed this whole show. But then there's that kind of really cliffhanger bizarrish cliffhanger thing at the end, like thinking that they were going to have another episode to kind of like resolve things, I think. And they just didn't have that, and they just canceled the show. And like I would say, like, man, they just like burned money in the last two episodes just because it's just like why do like a plane crashing? That seems kind of weird. Why go into any of the other like things that they did in these last two episodes just to just blow money? They had money to blow. Plus, also, it seems like there was a person who was obviously dead in one scene, but you could tell that they were breathing. Like you could tell they were breathing in and out. Like there are this episode of like these corpses where obviously like somebody's breathing in and out, so they're not technically dead. Or maybe they did supposedly change into being a vampire, but kind of flimsy. I'm sure it's just like, oh, like nobody's gonna pick out the one person that's breathing out of this whole entire group of dead people. But anyways, yeah. So this is a wrap. This is gonna be done, and then I'm gonna go on freaking 2 days of just like chillaxing. But because like this is way over where I probably would have like stayed up to do all of this. So like this is it. Like this will be the last video, and then I'll be like pre-made videos for 2 days. So yeah, so it's about that time to go into that coveted double five time territory and call this a show. Cause and hopefully I can do this coherently because I'm freaking exhausted. So spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about that time I'm gonna spoil this episode. God, I hope I remember all this because oh my god, I am so exhausted. Anyways, so let's go into spoilers. Like I would say overall good episodes to end this. Like it had the kind of the first movie Blade feel with Deacon Frost and Blade. It kind of had that like copy and paste kind of ending to me, but like anyways, so let's go into it. Uh so Marcus was to give Chase the Blade, and so in the very next episode, we are to have Chase on a plane, and Marcus is just like, well, I'm going to take care of Charlotte right now. And so the Charlotte plane is to go down in flames because there is a bomb on this plane, and so they are to go down in flames. There are two campers nearby where this plane had gotten down, and they went to try to see if there's any survivors, and there were two survivors, which were Thane and Charlotte. Coincidentally, out of all the people that should have brutally died on this plane, coincidentally, both Thorn and Charlotte were the only one to survive. Everyone else died. Isn't that so sad? So, Thorn and Charlotte consumed the campers that were making their way to like just say, "Hey, like, are you okay?" So, uh, so both Charlotte and Thorn like hobble their way to make it into town to where there is some uh people who are going and making food for a bunch of people, and so both Charlotte and Thorn are to go to find one woman that is to find Thorn kind of just on the ground, and so Charlotte comes around and sneaks up on this woman and bites her, so that way they can go and bite all of these people in this place to eventually have them turn, and eventually when Blade is to appear, uh, all of these vampires are to defend them, both Charlotte and Thorn. So let's a little bit. So uh so Blade is at his spot with Shen, and there is to be an FBI agent that is to uh, come on down to Blade's hideout because evidently this FBI agent just knows where Blade is. So Blade goes and grabs Collins and eventually figures out that he's a FBI agent. At first he thought it was just some homeless man. And so Blade is looking for Charlotte's plane that had gone down, but he can't figure out where exactly it is. Collins knows exactly where to be able to uh, find said plane. So Blade is like, oh, okay, well, find it for me. Like, if you can have just a couple clicks away to find this plane, then go ahead and do so. So Collins is to go ahead and put this information in to go and find this plane. But Blade realizes that, oh, okay, well, Collins isn't the guy that he says he is because he's putting in someone else's information to look this stuff up. Like he's putting in some girl named Jessica in the computer. Like so, evidently Collins isn't exactly a current FBI agent, and so Collins kind of comes clean. Is like, well, yeah, I was fired. So Blade is just like, oh, okay, so I guess we don't have the real, true, legitimate assistance of the FBI, like Collins had bluffed and played out. So, but both Blade and Collins decide to go to where Charlotte is, um, and decide to go and try to find them. And so, uh, bizarrely, while while Collins and Blade are fighting uh, Charlotte and Thorn, eventually Thorn or Collins is to get a blade in the leg. Funny enough, we have Collins who is like holding the blade, so that way, like he's holding the blade obviously, so that way it won't fall out. Because this show is cheap. Because it doesn't really seem like it feels like that good old like, hey, I got stabbed in the like in between the arm where my armpit is, so you can't see where the blade is. Like that's what it felt like that's what they were doing there. Like Collins had to hold the blade in place so it looked like he actually got stabbed and the blade is actually going through his leg. But whatever. So uh so Blade is to nurse Collins back to health, and so eventually Blade is taking Collins's blood and like taking with this mop, taking Collins's blood and just kind of like leading a trail so that way these vampires will make their way to Collins because Collins has a unique weapon only specific for this episode. So all of a sudden, Collins has these light bombs, like from Blade 2. Like all of a sudden, Collins has these light bombs or these light grenades, which I'm like, so wait a minute, like, did Blade have these this entire time and he's just now using these? What a lazy piece of like, he could easily just like use these probably a number of times during this show. Um, but also, it seems that Collins used these light grenades, and so that wipes out all the other like vampires that are in this spot. So eventually, it gets to have Blade now going after like Thorn again, and Blade is using his, of course, Blade, and Thorn is using this barbell uh, to try and swing at Blade because I guess you just have to use like surroundings and whatever. You can't all of a sudden have Thorn have a blade on him or whatever because plane crash or why wouldn't have Thorn had this blade before on him? Whatever it is what it is. So So Blade is eventually like fighting with Thorn, and eventually Collins is hobbling in there and distracting Thorn by saying, "Hey, Lurch!" And so Thorn turns, and Collins uh, is to shoot Thorn, but not to where it actually kills him. And then uh, Blade is to, after that, take out Thorn and kill him off. So Collins, while Blade is going after Thorn, Collins is trying to get to Charlotte, and Charlotte is using her vampire powers to make it so that Collins is under the whims of Charlotte, that she is to like hypnotize Collins into thinking that she is some like survivor of this whole thing, and that all of a sudden like she's looking for a mother and she's not actually the pure blood vampire or whatever. And Collins goes under the bizarrish uh like powers of this, which I'm like, I'm sorry, like there's plenty of stuff that bizarrely like gets put into this episode that has never been done in any of these other episodes. This seems kind of dumb. Like Collins tossing a ton of garlic because food products. Collins is tossing a ton of garlic on this one vampire woman, and I just thought that that was like absurd. I'm like, we've kind of said for Blade that Blade, all it takes is silver, like garlic and like garlic doesn't work, like crosses don't work. It's mostly just like sometimes holy water and like silver, but like I don't think we even use much of holy water in this show either. Um, but anyways, so pushing on, so Blade is to make it back because I'm kind of really skirting through a lot of stuff in these two episodes to just kind of bide my time, kind of quickly get some of these done. So Blade is to find Collins, and Collins had been bitten, and Collins might very well get turned soon. So because rapid fire, how bizarre! Like these people got bitten and seemingly got like turned like that. Like some got turned fairly quickly, and then some of them took forever. But like I guess it just depends on like you would have thought like all these people would have turned at almost the same time, but I guess they didn't. But to each their own. So Charlotte is trying to bargain with Blade, trying to say like, "Hey, we have cookies over by the dark side," and Blade is just like, I'm not much of a cookie person." Because really, Charlotte is just like, "Well, Blade, you know what? Like, I think that you like finally deserve like a seat at the table. Like, I think you should put down your weapons and join me because I think we can use your skills and talents to benefit the houses. Like I think we should finally bring you into the fold." And Blade is like, that sounds great. But you know what also sounds great? Your death. Like so eventually Blade is to kill Charlotte in a very like cheap kind of way. But then eventually we also get a very cheap comment by Collins, who's just like nice. I'm like, what garbage is that? So Collins is telling Blade, it's like, hey man, thanks, and Blade's like, thanks for what? And Collins is like, thanks for letting me kill one more or a couple more monsters. Blade is like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like, and so Collins is just like, okay, but now you have to do one last thing for me. And Blade is like, what? Like, you have to kill monsters now. Like, you have to kill a monster now. And so Blade is like, well, okay, I guess that means you, because you're going to turn soon. So Blade supposedly stabs Collins, but he doesn't turn into ash, so does he die like a normal human? I don't know. But also we have Tucker Matoff, who is to go into uh, Marcus's place and mention the building of the conclave. And so Marcus is to snap one of these guys, security guards, and just kind of like just get it done kind of thing. Like, and so Tucker is like, okay, great. Like, I'll go with some other security guard to just like finish this conclave. But yeah, just whatever with that episode or this part of this episode, because everything else is just like not really any all kinds of important. Plus, also, like we have Krista who just shows up back at Marcus's spot, and Marcus immediately asks like Krista in the very beginning of this, like, "You've been gone for 36 hours. Like, where have you been?" And Krista's like, "Oh, you counted the number of hours?" Like that doesn't answer anything, and Krista doesn't exactly say where she has been, and Marcus doesn't continue to question it, just letting it slide because like Marcus is just so smitten to eventually when we see in the very last episode there has to be some importance of Krista getting Isabel's necklace. Like eventually like it just shows a flashbacky scene of Marcus and Krista having this intimate moment, and Marcus gives Krista the necklace, and Krista's like, "Oh my God, you gave me Isabel's necklace? Like it was hers." And Marcus is like, "Well, yeah, now it's yours." Kind of sealing the deal on this whole relationship thing. But anyways, so and also when Chase is talking to the architect and then looking at Krista, she eventually notices necklace. And she's like, So, really, I think that kind of covers a bulk of the first or the other episode. I think there might be some little small detailish stuff here and there, but I think that covers a bulk of it. Yeah, so let's get into the last episode. So, the last episode is to have Chase figure out where Blade is hiding his or holding his hat, his hideaway. So Chase is to go and gun down Blade and Shen at the hideout because evidently Marcus had found information, like kind of figuring out some phone calls that have been made to Blade's hideout, and so they kind of figured out like, oh, okay, great, like we figured out where Blade's hideout is because it seems like there are some double agents, or it seems like there is some people that we have found that had led us to the Blade hideout. And we'll figure out who that is by the very end of this episode. So, Shen and Blade are now trying to, like, hit the wrong digits of their passcode to set off explosives in this hideaway. And Shen is consistently, like, trying to set off the wrong password to set off this bomb. But eventually Chase's men grab Shen and drag him out. And so Blade goes and hits the passcode thing to set off the explosion while Blade safely goes and hides in some like hideaway spot in this bunker so that way he doesn't die. So a bunch of explosions are going on. Chase is perfectly fine. She escapes with Shen, and so Chase takes Shen to of course the House of Chthon, where now Shen has to be tortured for information. And so, coincidentally enough, Krista has to go and torture Shen for information. because Marcus is watching as Krista is torturing Shen. Here's also the thing. Krista had called Blade and them, mentioning that their hideaway was going to be ambushed, and so like that kind of gave Blade and Shen the heads up. So so blah, blah, blah. So so Krista is going and working on Shen and peeling off some of his nails and then supposedly breaking his fingers, which that's not actually what she does. She breaks her own fingers, and Shen pretends that he broke his fingers. And then Marcus is like, "Well, you know what? I think you've worked him over good enough. Like, let's kind of make him ponder his own mortality because we have better things to do." So after Marcus and Krista are to leave, Shen is to figure out a way to sneak out. Like, he eventually finds one of the bodyguards, sends him a note saying, "Hey, dude, you got any toilet paper?" And the bodyguard goes in. Shen starts beating this bodyguard up, and Shen gets beaten the crap out of in the process, but Shen kind of outsmarts this guy and says, "Hey, it's daylight out, so I'm going to turn on this window so that way you can get freaking dusted." So Shen eventually is to sneak out of the House of Chthon and to call up Blade to have Blade go and retrieve him. But before Blade goes and is to get Shen, Blade is to make his way to the architect, the Tucker guy, and kind of squeeze him for information, kind of interrogate him, because he has to do this one last time. He has to interrogate somebody in the very last episode. So that's what he does. So Blade retrieves Shen and is asking him, "Hey, do you have do you have a wire on you, or are you infected?" And Shen is like, "Well, if they like stuck it up my butt, no." And like, "Does it look like I'm infected? Look at me, like I'm not infected. Like I'm not one of them." And so Blade and Shen's consensus is now that they need to go to the Conclave with the Eye of Tucker and kind of make their one last stand, but they only have very few weapons left at their disposal. And so they're hoping, like, here goes nothing. Uh, so Blade and Shen are to make their way into the Conclave, and so Marcus is to make this speech to all the purebloods that show up at this conclave about the Aurora, because really the showcase of this was to be of the Aurora, and so Marcus is doing this whole like speech going on, and really the Lord Rusk, who is kind of who's kind of like the more talking lord, where everybody else is just there to look good. Uh, like he's getting through like his like, "Come on, like we're getting tired of this. Like, come on, like get to the point already." And so Marcus is to go and hit this switch because he is to tell all the purebloods that the Aurora actually didn't work, and he broke the Aurora prop, and then what his real weapon was to kill off all the purebloods with this gas that was to be ventilated in. And so Marcus hits the button and the button doesn't work. And so Marcus is like, "What's going on?" And then Lord Rusk is like, "Ha ha 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 ha. Like, well, guess what happened? Like, we knew you were planning something all along, but we wanted to make sure if you were going to really go all the way with this. And because Chase had told us every single bit of this. Yeah, like Chase had betrayed Marcus finally. And I'm like, "Oh my god." So I guess Chase maybe was going to go off and be with a pureblood, or just be with a place to get her at a higher marks in the vampire ease of things. And so Chase betrayed Marcus, her own flesh and blood. That's kind of weird. So, but anyways, we have Blade who makes it to the Conclave, and so he is to go and kind of bust through here and kill a lot of people. But then eventually he is to go to the thing that was to kill all these purebloods. This device that was cut, and Blade finds that there's a part of it that could be like taken off and could be shot out to still kill all these purebloods. And so he takes this piece, and so he runs out to this spot and chucks this like container or something, shoots it, and then all the actual purebloods do die. And so now Marcus and Blade are fighting, and Krista and Chase are fighting. Chase tosses, or Krista tosses Chase down a couple flight of stairs, and Chase is just, or Krista is just assuming that Chase is dead, but there is no guarantee about that because maybe they were going to have Chase return for season 2. No. Anyways, the show's already over. So Marcus and Blade are fighting it out. And so Marcus is using the House of Chthon's blade, and of course Blade's using his normal blade. And so like Marcus and Blade are kind of fighting like all kinds of spots and whatever. And it is kind of funny because eventually the House of Chthon blade eventually breaks in half. And Blade is like, yeah, that's of course what happens with a House of Chthon blade. It's cheap and it breaks. So eventually, Blade is to go and try to kill Marcus, but before that happens, Krista is to come in and distract both Marcus and Blade. Shen is to shoot Krista, and so Marcus is to toss Blade off and to grab onto Krista and kind of I guess shove both one another like into this ventilation shaft, so I guess they could escape. And so both Blade and Shen are just like, hey, like at least we beat the spread kind of thing. And like, yeah, Krista and Marcus both got away, but like at least we're still going to like be in a good spot right here. So eventually Marcus and Krista are at Blade's hideout, and Krista is asking Marcus how exactly that Marcus figured out where Blade's hideout was, and Marcus is to say, well, yeah, like we've been kind of like watching certain people, and like we've been like kind of going and checking certain like we have all kinds of information, we have kind of all kinds of leaks and stuff like that. And eventually Marcus is to grab on to Krista and say, and how long have you been working for Blade? Because maybe I'm assuming maybe Marcus knew all along that Krista was involved with Blade, and that's how the show ends. I'm like, that's how the show ends? And I quickly wrapped it up. Because really, like, I just kind of quickly, like, kind of beat up and kind of really just, like, really quickly ran through a lot of these episodes way faster than I probably would normally. Because 2 episodes, and plus there's a ton of probably information that I just kind of skipped around about because I didn't want to get into much of the details. That's kind of weird. Like I thought this was gonna take like an hour or 2 hours or whatever, but I try to condense it down as much as humanly possible, just because I could, luckily. So yeah, like that's the meat and the potatoes of the last two episodes. But yeah, like that is it. For a bulk of it, there might be some dialogue here or there that I probably just don't care to go into because this is over. So if you guys want to check out any other supernatural things that I have probably in the near future will probably happen, I probably will be covering more vampire stuff. I probably will be covering zombie things probably. I'm kind of tempted into like doing some like zombie shows or something, but we'll figure that out when it comes to it because I don't want to say, oh yeah, I'm going to do this and then that not work out, or like I just decide not to do that. So I don't know. We'll see how things go. But yeah, I guess that's it for the show. For this show, kind of like the very least detailed review out of probably all these other reviews, but at least this is done. So with that said, I am going to get out of here. Bye everybody. Bye everybody.